The throne hall of the Arvani Empire was a place of shining light and silent fear. The walls were made of crystal that shifted color with the mood of its ruler, Princess Luria of the Seventh Star. The floor reflected like water, and long silver banners floated in the soft air. Every being who entered that chamber bent their heads low. Every word spoken there carried the weight of entire worlds. That morning, something strange happened in that perfect hall. For the first time, a human stood at its center. The alien guards whispered among themselves. Their armor shimmered with a faint blue glow, and their curved blades hung at their sides. Yet none of them dared to move closer to the human. His armor was dark gray, scratched and worn, marked by battles fought in dust and fire. The helmet covered his face completely, a smooth black visor hiding any sign of emotion. He stood tall, motionless, hands resting calmly behind his back. Princess Luria sat on her high crystal throne, her eyes fixed on him. She had heard much about humans' strange creatures from a world of storms and war, born on a planet too wild for any civilized being to endure. The Arvani had fought them for years across the borders of the Orion Rift. And yet, somehow these humans never stopped coming back. They built colonies in dead zones, lived where no oxygen lingered, and fought like storms themselves. Luria wanted to see what kind of being could rise from such chaos. She had demanded the guards bring her their captured human alive. She wanted to see the creature with her own eyes. Now, seeing him before her, she felt something she did not expect. Silence. Not fear, not anger, just silence.
As if the world itself
held its breath. Step forward, she ordered. The human obeyed. His boots made a deep sound against the crystal floor. The sound echoed, slow and steady, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Luria studied every movement. There was no sign of panic, no sign of weakness. He didn't look like a creature in chains. He looked like someone who had simply decided to walk here by choice. "What is your name?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp. He didn't answer. Her guards tensed. One of them took a step forward, but she raised her hand. "Let him speak for himself," she said. The human's voice came through the helmet, quiet but clear. "Commander Rion Holt, Terran Vanguard." Luria tilted her head. His tone was calm, almost too calm. She had seen enemy soldiers before, shaking, broken, pleading for their lives. But this man was different. He sounded as if he was talking to an equal. "You were captured after your fleet fell near the rift," she said. "Do you know what that means?" "It means my ship did its duty," he replied. The princess leaned back in her throne. His words were strange. No fear, no regret, just quiet certainty. She studied his armor. It looked heavy, older than anything the Arvani used. There were deep marks on the chest plate, as if he had faced 1,000 storms and kept walking. "You humans are curious," she said softly. "You fight for planets that mean nothing. You build colonies on frozen worlds. You throw yourselves into hopeless battles? Why?" The human tilted his head slightly. "Because they're ours," he said. The hall went silent again. Some of the alien guards exchanged confused looks. The word ours meant little in the Arvani language. Ownership belonged to the Empire, not to individuals. But when Rion said it, the word carried something powerful, something alive. Luria felt her curiosity grow. She stood up, the long silk of her robes flowing like water. "Remove your helmet," she commanded. Her words echoed through the hall. The guards looked at each other in disbelief. Removing a human's helmet was not a small thing. It was stripping away his protection, exposing him to their world. Many believed the humans hid behind their armor because they were too savage to look upon. For a moment, the human didn't move. The silence stretched until even the air seemed heavy. Then, slowly, he reached up. His hands moved with precision, unlocking the seals with a faint hiss. The sound was soft, almost respectful. The helmet came off, and he lifted it away. Princess Luria froze. The face beneath the armor was not what she expected. No beast, no savage. His skin was roughened by sun and time, his jaw strong but calm, his hair short and marked by streaks of gray near the temples. But it was his eyes that held her. They were human eyes, deep, steady, filled with something she had never seen before. There was no submission, no hatred, no fear, only quiet strength, the kind that did not need to shout. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. The guards around the hall shifted uneasily. None dared speak. Even the crystals on the walls dimmed, reflecting the stillness that had filled the air. She found herself whispering, almost without meaning to, "You are not what I imagined." Rian didn't reply. He stood there, holding his helmet in one hand, waiting. The quiet confidence in his posture made every alien present feel small, though he said nothing. Finally, she stepped down from her throne. Each step she took echoed like glass under her feet. She stopped only a few steps away from him. "You don't fear me?" she asked. "I don't know you," he said simply. "Why should I fear you?" His words struck her more deeply than he could have known. For her entire life, everyone had feared her, her advisors, her guards, even her own family. But this human spoke to her as if she were just another person. "You should fear what my empire can do," she said, her tone sharpening slightly, more out of habit than anger. He met her gaze without flinching. "Empires rise and fall," he said. "People endure." Something in her chest tightened. She turned slightly to hide her face, afraid her expression might betray what she felt. "You speak like a philosopher, not a soldier." "I speak like someone who's seen too much," he said. The guard shifted again, waiting for orders. But Luria didn't speak. She was lost in thought. This human, this single captured being was somehow shaking her. Certainty more than all the wars she had fought. After a long silence, she asked, "Do you hate us?" He took a deep breath. "No," he said. "Hate wastes time. I only protect my own." His words were plain, yet they felt heavier than anything she'd ever read in her empire's ancient texts. Luria turned her head toward the high windows, where stars shone through the transparent crystal walls. She had always believed her people were the chosen ones, meant to rule the weaker species. But looking at this man, she wondered who was truly strong, the one who ruled or the one who endured. "What would you do if I set you free?" she asked quietly. Rian hesitated only for a moment. "Go home," he said, "and rebuild what was broken." His answer was too simple, too pure. She almost smiled. "You expect mercy from me?" "No," he said. "But hope costs nothing." The hall was silent again. Luria looked at him for a long time, then finally turned to her guards. "Remove his chains," she said. The guards stared at her in shock. "Your Highness, that's an order," she said firmly. They obeyed, though their hands trembled. The moment the chains fell, Rian didn't run or fight. He simply stood there, rubbing his wrists once, then folded his arms behind his back again, as if the chains had meant nothing. Luria found herself staring at him once more. She wanted to understand why he didn't kneel, why he didn't beg, why he didn't even seem surprised. It was as if he had already accepted everything life could do to him. Nothing more could touch him. "Commander Rian Holt," she said softly, "do all humans act as you do?" He gave a faint smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "No, but enough of us try." Something inside her shifted. The word enough carried the weight of millions. She saw in him not just one man, but the reflection of an entire species that refused to surrender people, who stood against impossible odds and kept walking. She turned back toward her throne, hiding the storm of thoughts rising within her. "You will remain here," she said. "As my guest." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Guest was not a word used for prisoners. "As you wish," Rian said. She sat back down, trying to steady herself. Her mind replayed the moment he had removed his helmet. His calm eyes, his voice that carried neither arrogance nor fear, it all stayed with her. She had expected to see a monster. Instead, she had seen something painfully human, as the guards led him out toward his quarters. Luria remained alone in the hall. The crystals around her reflected her image perfect. Royal, flawless, but for the first time, she felt small against the reflection of that calm human face. when the doors finally closed. She whispered to the empty room, "What kind of strength makes a man stand tall when the stars themselves turn against him?" Outside in the corridor, Rian walked silently. 2 guards followed, but he barely noticed them. He looked through the clear walls of the alien ship at the endless stars beyond. Somewhere among those lights was Earthscarred, struggling alive. He didn't know if he'd ever see it again. But the thought didn't hurt. He had seen something else, that day a princess with eyes full of questions. For the first time since his capture, he felt something new in his chest, something faint and steady, like the warmth of a rising sun. Both of them, without knowing it, had taken the first step toward changing everything the galaxy believed about humans. The ship drifted through deep space, its long silver wings glowing softly under the stars. Inside, the air carried a strange tension. Every Arvani soldier felt it, though none dared to speak of it. They all knew the human was still alive and worse, that the princess herself had ordered it so. Commander HumanADULT was no longer chained. He had been given a small chamber at the edge of the royal deck-bare walls, a small light, a single bed. Yet, to him, it felt like freedom compared to the cells of other empires. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't try to escape. He simply sat by the window, watching the stars roll past like waves on a black ocean. Every few hours, guards came to check on him. They never spoke. They only stared for a moment, uneasy, then left. To them, the human was strange, too quiet, too calm. It was as if he carried something invisible, something heavier than any weapon. Princess Leia watched him through the ship's internal screens. She told herself it was for security. But the truth was more complicated. She wanted to understand him. Every time she saw his calm face, she felt both curious and unsettled. No alien in her empire would dare look at her the way Rian did, without fear, without flattery, without pretending. It was not arrogance. It was honesty. And that honesty disturbed her more than any insult. One evening, she left her throne chamber quietly without her guards. Her people would call it reckless, but she didn't care. She walked through the dim corridors until she reached the human's room. The door opened with a soft hum. Rian turned his head slightly. "Princess." She stepped in. The door closed behind her. The hum of the engines filled the silence. "You knew it was me," she said. "You walk like someone who owns everything," he replied. Leia raised an eyebrow, half amused. "And humans? How do we walk?" He looked back at the stars. "Like someone who's lost everything but still keeps walking." The simplicity of his words made her pause. She moved closer, folding her hands behind her back. "You speak as if you understand pain," she said. "I do," he replied. "Pain teaches. So does loss." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She had studied human history, how they rose from wars and storms, how they turned ruins into homes. But hearing it spoken by one who had lived it was different. There was no pride in his voice, only quiet strength. "You are difficult to understand," she said softly. "That makes 2 of us," Rian answered. A faint smile on his lips. Her eyes narrowed slightly, though not in anger. She was used to commanding silence, not conversation. But this human kept speaking to her as if they were equals. It was both annoying and strangely refreshing. She looked around his simple room. There was nothing there, no sign of comfort, no personal object, not even a chair. "Do you not miss your world?" she asked. "I do," he said. "But missing doesn't bring it closer. The stars don't care about distance. They only shine." His words were strange to her ears. Yet they painted pictures she could almost see: lonely stations, broken colonies, tired soldiers looking up at the same stars she ruled over. "Tell me about your people," she said suddenly. Rian hesitated. "Why? I want to understand why you fight so hard for a planet so fragile." He took a slow breath. "Because it's home. Not perfect, not easy, but ours. Every mountain, every ocean, every scar on its surface belongs to us. We fight because we remember what it felt like to lose everything once. We promise never again." Leia stared at him quietly. His words carried no weapons, Yet they struck with more force than any fleet. For the first time in her life, she felt something unfamiliar, quiet envy. She had ruled planets, commanded fleets, and yet, hearing him speak of Earth, she realized she had never loved anything the way he loved his broken world. "You speak of belonging," she whispered, "but you are alone here. How can you still believe?" Rian looked at her, his eyes steady. "Belief isn't something you lose because of distance. It's something you carry." The silence that followed was deep and gentle. Luria turned toward the door, unsure what to say next. "You are free to rest," she said finally. "Tomorrow, you will meet the council. They wish to question you." "I expected as much," he replied calmly. When she left, she found herself walking slower than usual. For reasons she didn't understand, the air felt heavier. The next day, the council chamber glowed with silver light. 12 high-ranking Arvani stood in a circle, their long robes shimmering like liquid metal. At the center stood Rian, unarmed, unchained. Luria sat at the head of the circle. One of the elders stepped forward. "Human," he said sharply, "you have fought against our fleets. You have destroyed our outposts. Why should we keep you alive?" Rian looked at the elder calmly. "Because killing me won't change what your empire fears." The elder frowned. "And what is that?" "That humans don't stop." The room grew silent. The elder's eyes narrowed. "You think persistence is strength?" Rian shrugged lightly. "It's the only kind that lasts." The council members murmured among themselves. Some looked insulted, others uneasy. Luria remained quiet, watching him. There was no arrogance in his tone, only certainty, and that made his words dangerous. Another counselor spoke. "You think you are better than us?" "No," he said. "Just different." "Different how?" He looked around slowly. "You build empires to control life. We build homes to survive it." The elder slammed his hand on the table. "You speak boldly for a prisoner." Rian met his gaze. "Freedom isn't about where I stand. It's about who I am." Luria felt the weight of his words settle over the chamber like a storm. She saw her council hesitate. For all their power, none of them could argue with him. Finally, one elder turned to her. "Your Highness, this creature cannot remain here. His presence spreads unrest." The soldiers whisper about him. They see him as something more than what he is. Luria's voice was calm. "And what is he?" The elder bowed slightly. "A threat." She looked at Rian again. He stood in silence, his eyes fixed forward. Something deep inside her rebelled at the idea of calling him a threat. He was not loud, not cruel, not defiant. He was simply unbroken. After a long pause, she said, "He stays, until I say otherwise." The elders protested, but her tone ended the argument. When the chamber cleared, only the princess and the human remained. "You speak to my council as if they were your equals," she said quietly. "I spoke to them as people," he replied. "That's usually enough." Her lips curved slightly, though she hid it quickly. "You risk much by speaking that way." "I've already risked everything," he said. She studied him for a long moment. "You are not afraid of death, are you?" He shook his head. "I'm afraid of forgetting who I am." The answer left her silent again. She had spent her life surrounded by those who feared her command, who obeyed without question. Yet this single human, standing unarmed before her, seemed freer than anyone she knew. "Tell me, Commander," she said softly, "if you had the chance to escape, would you?" He smiled faintly. "Would you let me?" She didn't answer. Their eyes met across the chamber, and for a heartbeat there was no empire, no prisoner. No crowned, just two beings trying to understand each other across the vast distance between their worlds. That night, Luria returned to her private observatory. The stars stretched before her like a map of endless choices. Her thoughts were heavy. The human's words kept replaying in her mind. Freedom isn't about where. I stand. She pressed her hand to the cold glass and whispered, "How can a species born from chaos understand peace better than we do?" A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. It was her advisor, Marin. "Your Highness, there are rumors among the crew. They say the humans saved you once before the capture." Is it true? Luria turned sharply. Rumors are just wind, Marin. Let them blow. But even as she said it, she knew the truth behind the whisper. During the last skirmish near the rift, her cruiser had been struck by debris. The bridge had nearly collapsed, and reports said a human pilot had diverted his own dying ship to shield hers. She had never known who that pilot was until now. Her chest tightened as realization struck her. It was him. The thought shook her. She sat down slowly, her breath unsteady. If that story was true, then HumanADULT had saved her life long before they ever met in her hall. She rose from her seat and looked out again at the stars. Her voice was barely a whisper. Why would he save an enemy? There was no answer, only the endless hum of the ship and the quiet pulse of the stars outside. Hours later, unable to rest, she went back to his chamber. The guards at the door looked confused, but didn't stop her. Inside, Rian was awake, sitting near the window. The stars reflected faintly in his eyes. You don't sleep much, she said. Habit, he replied. The quiet helps me think. She hesitated. Why did you save me during the battle at the rift? He didn't look surprised. You remember that? I remember the reports. I didn't know it was you. He turned slightly toward her. You were a target. My ship was burning anyway. I could make the end mean something. She frowned. You risked your life to save an enemy. He looked at her calmly. I saved a life, not an enemy. Luria felt her throat tighten. She had no answer. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the engines filled the silence again. Finally, she said quietly. Perhaps you were right about one thing, Commander. The stars don't care about distance. But maybe they care about those who still look up, he smiled faintly. Maybe they do. Outside the window, a bright star passed slowly across the dark horizon, and for the first time since the war began. The princess of the Arvani Empire and the Huma. The Arvani fleet moved like a silver storm across the void of space, its engines humming softly against the black backdrop of stars. Princess Luria stood on the upper bridge, her hands resting lightly on the railing, her eyes fixed on the endless horizon. Every ship was aligned perfectly, a show of her people's precision and discipline. Yet her mind was elsewhere. On the human who had captured more of her attention than she cared to admit, Commander. HumanADULT had been awake nearly all night. His small quarters offered little comfort, but he had grown used to it. He sat near the window, legs drawn close, and watched the stars as they passed by. Even though he was a prisoner on an alien ship, the quiet constancy of the stars reminded him of home. The door to his room opened. Luria entered without her usual guards. The presence of the princess was unsettling to many, but Rian barely moved. He simply acknowledged her with a nod. You do not fear me, she said softly, closing the door behind her. I have learned that fear wastes energy, he replied. Her eyes studied him, sharp and thoughtful. You have been observing this fleet, she said. What do you think of it? He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. It is disciplined, precise, and deadly. But it is not invincible. The princess raised an eyebrow. Dangerous words for someone who is my guest is dangerous, he said simply. I do not underestimate what you command, but I do not fear it either. For a long moment, she was silent. Few humans had ever spoken so directly to her, and none had ever carried such weight in their words. He was calm, but not naive. He understood the power around him. He faced it without flinching. You are unlike any human I have known, she said finally. Most are timid or arrogant. You are neither. I survive, he replied quietly. The simplicity of his answer made her smile faintly, though she quickly hid it. There was a strange strength in him, one that came from enduring hardship, from never surrendering. She realized that she was drawn to it in ways she did not fully understand. The next morning, the council demanded his presence again. The chamber was colder than usual, the light reflecting sharply off the crystal walls. 12 Arvani counselors waited, their expressions unreadable. Luria followed behind Rian silently. Human, said one of the counselors. An elder with silver streaks along his long hair, your continued survival disturbs the fleet. Many believe that your calmness inspires our soldiers more than our orders do. Why do you not fear us? I respect strength, but I do not fear it, Rian answered. Fear is for those who cannot act. The counselor's eyes narrowed. And do you act now? I have acted since I arrived. I have survived. I have obeyed your commands. I have spoken truthfully. Whispers ran through the council chamber. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that the aliens could not deny. The princess remained silent, studying him as though she were trying to see every thought behind his calm face. Commander Lurea finally spoke, her voice carrying over the murmurs. You have seen my fleet. You have seen the power of the Arvani, and yet you speak of survival and respect? Tell me, do humans truly survive all odds? Rian looked at her carefully. Not all survive, but those who do carry the strength of those who fell. Every human who survived learned something new. They endure. That is our way. The words were simple, yet piercing. The counselors shifted uneasily. They were warriors and strategists, but his certainty unsettled them. He spoke not as a soldier, but as someone who had lived and seen the cost of every battle. Hours passed as the council questioned him. Rian answered each query with quiet precision. He spoke of human endurance, of Earth's resilience, and of the value of every life. He did not boast. He did not beg. He simply explained, and in doing so, he revealed a courage the Arvani had never seen. At one point, an elder asked sharply, "What would your people do if they faced our fleet unarmed?" Rian did not flinch. They would find a way. They always do. The words hung in the chamber like a storm. The counselors knew he spoke truth. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and often underestimated. Their history was filled with triumphs over impossible odds. But hearing it from one of them standing unarmed before their empire made the possibility real. Lurea watched him carefully. She had expected fear, defiance, or arrogance. Instead, he offered only honesty. The strength in his calmness was undeniable. It stirred something deep within her, a mixture of respect, curiosity, and admiration. Later that day, a sudden alarm rang through the ship. Red lights flashed as a message came from the outer perimeter of the fleet. Lurea rushed to the command bridge. Rian followed silently, observing the operations without interrupting. The sensors showed a fleet approaching rapidly unknown vessels, sleek and fast, weapons charged. The Arvani officers moved quickly, issuing orders. But Lyria's mind was partly on the human beside her. "Commander," she said quietly, "what would you do in my place?" He studied the holographic display, calculating with calm eyes. "I would protect what matters most. I would not underestimate the enemy. And I would use every advantage I have to survive." She nodded, her mind racing. The fleet's approach was dangerous, but she could not ignore the wisdom in his words. She gave orders with precision, each decision deliberate and clear. The Arvani ships responded like a well-oiled machine. But the tension in the air was thick. The unknown fleet did not fire immediately. It seemed to be observing, analyzing, waiting for a signal. Lurea's heart beat faster than it had in years. She turned to Rian. "Do you think they mean to attack?" she asked quietly. "They test," he replied simply. "They want to know what you can do." Her gaze hardened. "Then they will learn." As the unknown ships drew closer, Rian noticed something unusual. Their movement patterns were irregular, almost hesitant. "They are not just testing," he said. "They are trying to communicate." Lurea frowned. "Communicate?" "Yes," he said. "They are waiting for a signal. A mistake could trigger violence. But if you respond correctly, you might avoid battle." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Show me." Rian moved to the console beside her, his hands steady and precise. He tapped several commands, analyzing the fleet's patterns. Slowly, he suggested a series of maneuvers non-aggressive, yet strategic, showing strength without provocation. The unknown fleet paused. Their sensors scanned the Arvani ships. Then, gradually, they adjusted their approach. There was no attack, only a cautious alignment, waiting for a sign of goodwill. Lurea exhaled softly, impressed. "You have saved us from a battle we did not start." she said quietly. Rian looked at her calmly. We are not enemies unless we choose to be. Sometimes survival is more than strength, it is understanding. Her chest tightened. For the first time in her life, she realized the truth of his words. This human, a prisoner in her empire, had just prevented disaster through insight and courage. It's not force. That night, after the fleet had retreated, Luria returned to Rian's quarters. The princess entered quietly, the soft glow of the room reflecting in her eyes. You did something today that none of my people could, she said softly. You used wisdom, patience, and understanding. I only acted as I would hope others would, he replied. She studied him closely. Do all humans act like this? No, he said, but enough of us try. She smiled faintly, though it was a smile she did not share openly. You are extraordinary, Commander, in ways I cannot fully explain. And you, he replied quietly, are a leader with more curiosity than most. That can be dangerous. She laughed softly. The sound was unfamiliar to her own ears, gentle and light. Perhaps. But it is better than living in fear. They stood together in silence, looking out at the stars. The events of the day had shifted something subtle, yet profound. The human's calm wisdom had not only saved her fleet, but it also stirred feelings in her that she did not fully understand. For the first time, Luria felt something beyond duty and command. She felt respect, admiration, and a deep, quiet curiosity for the human who had entered her life and changed everything outside. The stars continued to shine, indifferent yet beautiful. Two souls from different worlds sat quietly together, both aware that their meeting had altered the course of more than one empire. The universe was vast, dangerous, and unknown. Yet in that moment, there was peace, a small, fragile peace, born from courage, understanding, and the quiet strength of a human who refused to be broken. And Princess Luria knew that nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The Arvani fleet was quiet that morning, the silver wings of the ships reflecting the pale light of distant stars. Princess Luria stood on the upper bridge, her hands resting lightly on the railing, her eyes sweeping across the calm expanse of space. The fleet's engines hummed softly beneath her feet, but her mind was elsewhere on Commander Rian Holt. The human who had changed everything she thought she knew. Rian's small chamber was just down the corridor. He had slept little, but it didn't matter. Sleep had become unnecessary for him. Focus and observation were what mattered now. He sat near the window, legs folded, hands resting on his knees, watching the endless stars drift by. Each movement of his eyes reflected calm determination, strength born from survival and quiet patience. The door opened and Luria stepped in without her guards. She moved slowly, as if each step mattered. The human looked up, meeting her gaze with calm, steady eyes. You have not spoken to the council today, she said softly. I did not need to, he replied. They already see the truth. Luria studied him. There was no pride, no arrogance, only quiet confidence and intelligence. Do you think you are safe here? She asked. Safety is relative, he said, but I am where I can observe, learn, and act when necessary. She nodded, though she did not speak for a moment. Something in her chest tightened. Every decision she had made regarding him had been questioned by her council. Every action watched closely. Yet she had chosen to trust this human, something she had never done before with any being in her life. Hours later, alarms sounded through the fleet. Red lights flashed along the corridors, and the hum of engines deepened into a low rumble. The sensors had detected an incoming signal from deep space, a fleet of unknown origin, faster and more numerous than anything the Arvani had encountered before. The bridge filled with tension. Officers moved quickly, issuing commands with precision. But Luria's mind was partly on Rian. She turned to him quietly. What do you see? She asked. Rian approached the display console, analyzing the incoming fleet. They are cautious, he said. Not immediately hostile, but they are fast, organized, and prepared to act. This is a test of sorts. Luria's lips pressed together. A test of what? Of understanding, he said. They are probing the Arvani fleet, watching for patterns, weaknesses, or errors. Any mistake could trigger combat. Her eyes narrowed. Then we must be careful, Rian nodded. Careful, but decisive. The best defense is not always attack. Sometimes it is patience and observation. She looked at him thoughtfully. The human had already prevented disaster once before. Could she trust him again? Without hesitation, she decided she could. Show me, she said. Together, they devised a plan. The Arvani fleet would move in patterns that displayed strength without aggression, signaling readiness without provocation. They adjusted the shields, rotated ships into defensive formations, and sent subtle signals of communication to the unknown fleet. Rian's knowledge of human tactics combined with Lyria's command of her ships created a perfect balance. Slowly, the unknown fleet responded, slowing its approach, scanning the Arvani formation, testing their intentions. Lyria felt her chest tighten with anticipation. Every eye on the bridge was focused, yet her attention remained fixed on the human. He moved with calm precision, issuing suggestions and making calculations without haste or doubt. It was as if he had already lived through countless battles and had emerged unbroken every time. Finally, the unknown fleet adjusted its course completely. There was no attack, no hostile fire. They had accepted the Arvani signals as non-threatening and left a path open. The fleet's command reports indicated surprise and relief among the Arvani officers. You have done it again, Lyria said softly. You avoided battle without firing a single shot. Rian's lips curved faintly into a smile. Sometimes survival is more than strength, he said. It is understanding, patience, and timing. Her chest tightened. Once again, he had shown her a strength she could not teach. One that came from a calm mind, steady heart, and unshakable courage. That night, after the fleet had retreated, Lyria returned to Rian's quarters. He sat near the window, the stars reflecting faintly in his eyes. You have changed the course of today, she said quietly. Not with weapons, but with insight. I did what I could, he replied. She studied him for a long moment. Humans are remarkable, she said softly. Not because of technology or fleets, but because of persistence and courage. Not all humans, he said, but enough of us try. Her lips curved into a faint, unguarded smile. You are extraordinary, she said, in ways I cannot fully explain. And you, he replied quietly, are a leader willing to listen. That is rare. She turned toward the window, staring at the stars. Do you know what you have done? You have reminded me why I fight not for power, not for empire, but for life itself. For those who endure, Rian remained silent, letting her words settle. There was no need to speak. Both understood the unspoken bond forming between them, connection forged in courage, respect, and shared understanding. The following days brought more challenges. Supplies ran low, unknown signals arrived from distant sectors, and the fleet remained on alert. But every decision Lyria made, guided by Rian's counsel, strengthened her command and ensured the safety of her people. During one quiet moment, she asked him, if I offered you freedom, would you leave? Rian paused, considering. Freedom is not about leaving or staying, he said. It is about choice, and I choose to help you now. Perhaps later, I will return to my people. Her heart quickened. She realized that this human, though a prisoner, was more loyal than most of her officers, not out of fear, but because he understood duty, courage, and the value of life. You are not just a human, she said softly. You are a teacher. You have shown me what it means to endure. And you, he said quietly, have shown me that understanding is as powerful as any fleet. Weeks passed, and the fleet finally approached the outer rim of the galaxy. A decision had to be made: return to Arvani space, or attempt first contact with other civilizations beyond. Lyria consulted her counsel, but ultimately she turned to Rian. What do you advise? She asked. Rian studied the star systems ahead. Move forward carefully. Use diplomacy first. Show strength only when necessary. And trust your instincts. Those who endure are also those who adapt. She nodded, trusting his counsel completely. Under his guidance, the Arvani fleet moved through unknown space, avoiding unnecessary conflict and establishing alliances that strengthened her people. One evening, Luria visited Rion once more in his quarters. The room was quiet, filled only with the soft glow of the stars outside. She stood by the window, her gaze distant, her thoughts reflective. "You have changed me," she said softly. Rion looked at her, calm and steady. "Perhaps we change each other," he said. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "You have reminded me that power is not enough. Courage, patience, and understanding are what truly endure. And you," he said quietly, "have reminded me that leadership is not about command alone. It is about responsibility, compassion, and listening." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Neither needed to speak. Their bond had grown strong in the quiet, through trials and shared understanding. Finally, she spoke again. "The galaxy is vast, and there will be more challenges. But with you here, I feel prepared. Not because of your strength, but because of your mind and heart. And you," he said, "have taught me that even in a foreign empire, trust and courage can create peace." Outside, the stars shone brightly, indifferent, yet full of possibility. Two beings from different worlds stood together, united not by empire or war, but by understanding courage, and the quiet strength that defines humanity. The human and the princess knew the universe would always be dangerous, full of unknowns and challenges, but they had faced it together, and in doing so, they had changed not only the course of the Arvani Empire, but also the future of countless worlds. For Commander Rion Holt, it was proof that humanity could survive, thrive, and teach even the greatest civilizations the power of courage and endurance. For Princess Leia, it was proof that understanding, patience, and respect could transform fear into alliance, war into wisdom, and strangers into allies, and together, they stood at the window of the crystal ship, looking at the stars, knowing that the galaxy was not just theirs to command, it was theirs to protect. Endure and inspire, the universe waited, vast and mysterious. But in that moment, two souls from different worlds had discovered a truth stronger than any fleet, brighter than any star. Endurance, courage, and understanding can change everything.